Um, so, first of all, I'm Martin Ralph, and we've been working jointly with the Workers' Voice, that's the International Socialist League, to try to host this meeting. And so far, the technology seems to be up to speed. So, first of all, welcome everyone, in particular those workers that are going on strike or are on strike, and in this meeting, that's obviously the RMT. We have a couple of rail workers from Italy, Danny from the GMB, and two speakers from the RMT, one from London, one from Liverpool. And so just by way of a introduction, the idea would be to try and get the speakers within the hour, more or less, and then open it up for questions and answers. There's a chat session, as always, and there's also something called the Q&A that should be at the bottom of your screen, and you can use either one if you wish. So just to say, at this moment, the strike wave has become one of the leading industrial struggles of workers in the world. And that's clearly why we're holding this meeting, and why a number of trade union fighters and activists would ask to come along as well. Just to say, we all heard this nonsense from Boris Johnson when he was Prime Minister, that he was going to create something that was a world leading industry or a world leading that. I'm sure he never imagined that actually one thing he was doing is creating a world leader of the British working class, or the working class in the UK. So the strike wave continues, and it's moving on to fight and to face the financial and economic crisis that we're all living. The cost of living, you just go to your gas meter every day and you just see it rolling up, and everyone feels that, obviously. But we've got a very deep economic crisis that we're all living and that we all have to face. Alongside with incredible, immense greed to feed themselves with the money that we create as value. And so they've now got rid of another Prime Minister. I'm not going to go into that. Everyone knows that. But just to say, not only here, but there are large mobilizations taking place across the world. Last night, I was in a meeting hosted in Mexico with a group of workers that have been on strike for 1,000 days, and they were supported by many unions from other countries. Obviously, we know about the workers, the women and the workers in Iran. In the Sudan, even with a dictatorship, there's escalating committees and strike committees mobilizing for their strike on the 6th of November. So there is a lot going on. This meeting is obviously concentrating on what we as workers and the working class can do in the strike to gain what it is that we want, which is a future rather than something that keeps on declining under this system. The food banks in this country, which replaced to some extent the benefits, said we're running out of food. And there's a lot of talk about heat banks, as poor families have to answer this question: do they eat or heat? So you have all of that. And I know, talking to the RMT and many other workers, you know, they're feeling not just for themselves, and they're fighting, of course, for their demands, but the whole situation facing the class is what worries us all, and how we're going to fight. So certainly we know a little bit about the French strike in November. The trade unionists in Belgium said there's a strike for a general strike, a call for a general strike. And Italy, we can hear more about that. So we're not alone. There are actions at different levels, more or less successful and so on, but it's happening. just to say, to finish, the strike wave intensified in October in this country. Postal workers announced many days of strike action into December. Liverpool dock workers are coming out for another 2 weeks from Monday. The latest is that nearly 2 million workers are set to strike or are balloting for industrial action. The UCU just finished their ballot, or finishes on Monday, and but it involves the teachers, the nurses, junior doctors. They're all threatening walkouts in fight for pay rises, and the PCS are balloting 120,000. As so many speakers have said on the picket lines, the working class in this country is back, and that's what we're talking about today, and how we can help assist and support the movement of all these tremendous and inspiring fighters that you see almost every day on the picket lines. Just to finish by saying that the TUC Congress, because of the CWU, Unite, RMT, UCU, NEU, passed motions calling for inter-union national coordinated strikes. So there is a lot to fight for, and I would say that every time you go to a picket line, there is just overwhelming support for the idea of national coordinated strikes or a general strike. So we have many things to discuss, and I just wanted to finish there and invite Glenroy to explain to us what he wants to say about this strike movement, about the RMT, etc. And I would say that I don't know how long it is, but it's certainly many years since we became aware of Glenroy. And the first time we became aware was when we received a letter from the Finsbury Park RMT branch, when we were organising with many others a trade union conference called No One Is Illegal, to fight for the immigrant working classes as well. And we had that letter, and they said they wanted to support. They couldn't be there, but they will support. And indeed, the next time we saw them, I think that they organised such a conference in London. And since then, we've had many connections, I think. So Glenroy is extremely welcome to explain to us what he wanted to say. This, just to let everybody also know that there is a interpretation going on into Spanish. So I think that's all I need to say about that. Glenroy, over to you.
Thank you, comrade, and for our comrade in Spanish, greetings, compañeros. You mentioned the issue of food bank, and you know, I don't know where everybody is as far as the royal family is concerned, but I was somewhat taken back when I understand that food banks were being closed during the time of the so-called mourning in this country. So again, somewhere along the priority that seems to be in the ruling class's agenda very much differs from those of us who are struggling with the cost of living and the energy crisis, which obviously I think go hand in hand. Thank you for reminding me, Martin, about the No One Is Illegal, because that's a very important part of our struggle, because so many times, especially on the underground, some of the people at the sharp end of some of the disparity that's going on there are migrant workers. And I speak specifically about the cleaning members on the underground and other parts of the railway system, but specifically on the underground, how they are being left out of any benefit, even during COVID when they had to come in. We've made some small gain recently that the mayor of London, who as people might know, he's a Labour mayor, not a left-wing mayor, but a Labour mayor, who finally, after our relenting pressure and demands, have decided that they will provide not free travel, because it's not free, people are paying for it, but travel concession on the underground. And, you know, it's an appalling situation where workers are paying for traveling whilst at work. In other words, a cleaner might come to one station to start his or her duty, but is then expected to go to another station and are expected to buy a ticket to travel during their time of work to another station. Now, most of them refuse. However, if ticket inspectors or whatever you do encounter them, they seek to charge them. And we find that an obscene situation. So what I don't want to do is to be here only talking about those who are on strike, those who have managed to carry out their balloting process, because one of the things that are here is demands on how you have the right to strike. You have thresholds. You have to overcome how many people participate in the ballot. And out of those, you have to have 50%. And then out of the remainder, there's another proportion that you have to have that are voted yes in order to take strike action. And the latest scenario, which covers, I think Darren will go into, but covers predominantly rail workers, is that we're expected to provide minimum service during strike action. And it's the most ludicrous thing I have ever heard. Because in essence, we have, for example, within my grade, the train driving grade, 2 unions, ASLEF and ourselves. If we ballot for a specifically train drivers issue, and ASLEF do not, or even if they do and are not taking strike action, are they then the provider of the minimum service? Or, as many of us have speculated, what the government legislation is meant to do is to say those people on strike should select among their numbers people to cross their own picket line to go and run a service. Now, how is that selection meant to be done? It would be chaos. And most workers, I think, would refuse to be party to that. They have voted to take strike action. How dare anyone say you have to set that aside and go into work to scab against your own dispute? That's just some of that legislation. And as I say, I think it's specifically aimed at train drivers and railway workers right across the country. I think it's legislation that they can attempt to apply to other industries. And I think that all of us need to look very carefully at that. As Martin has said, workers are back. Industrial action are back. I'm old enough to remember the '89 dispute, where a similar situation started. And our union was again at the forefront of reigniting those struggles. So we've been here before. What I think is changed is the political dynamic in the background, if we can call it dynamic, because, you know, it looks more like a form of madness. And people say if you do the same thing, keep doing the same thing again, it is a sign of madness. So when we hear them talking about Boris Johnson coming back, we think that, I certainly think it's a great idea, because it would expose the hypocrisy and dishonesty in the Tory government. But I'm not so tied to that I think it must happen. Our own struggle on the underground currently is around two things, and we don't want any of those things to be dropped off the table, so to speak. Management have proposed 600 jobs on the platform on the underground, i.e. the staff that see our trains safely out of the station, that ensure that passenger flow and control is taken care of, any emergency is dealt with. If emergency vehicle need to be brought in, they're there at the forefront. And this is the company that closes the booking office, the ticket sellers in essence, on the underground, with the promise that staff would be more visible. That was the catchphrase. We take the staff out of the booking office and make them more visible around the station. The same rubbish that they're saying to the main line, and I hope Darren will cover that a little bit more. But it's the same philosophy, which turned out to be a lie, because a few years later now, they're saying they want to get rid of 600 of those staff that were to make themselves more visible. There is a joke within this, by the way, and I'll put it in now, where one of the things that they did or said during the removal of people from the booking office was that they will give them an high visibility vest, and that would make them more visible. So less staff with bigger or brighter high visibility vests was the order of the day. The second thing is an attempt to steal our pension fund, and there's no other way to put it than that. It's an act of theft. The government under Boris Johnson tried to suggest that they have to cut the cost of the pension fund. Now, we do have a good pension fund. We're told it's one of the best in the country, etc., etc. But it's not because of generosity among the bosses. Our pension fund is a contribution by workers and the employer, but it's also part of our negotiation every year that we go for a pay rise. What we get is also measured by how much our pension is likely to be. Pension is not some kind of favor. Pension is a salary that we haven't taken yet, that we are expected to have in our retirement. And of all people, the person who was brought in to look at our pension fund was a former trade union leader, a TUC Congress General Secretary, Brendan Barber. Oh, Sir Brendan Barber. I shouldn't forget that he's been titled and sent to the House of Lords. So he was asked, and they tried to sell it to us that because he was a former TUC General Secretary, he would somehow be fair to us. Well, if people think, and this has been the story, and I want to end this, Chair, if people fell for that, what we found ourselves in is that one of the options put forward by the going into the investigation by Brendan Barber is there is a possibility that maybe they won't need to do anything, you know, because the pension fund is secure. We've got millions of pounds. A few years ago, we were so flush with funds in the pension fund that the employers took a pension holiday, I think 5 years, where they refused to make any contribution. That's how much money we had. We took legal action and they've had to pay it back, but it means we have quite a great deal of money. But despite one of the options being that if it's good, don't try to fix it. If it's not broken, leave it. That's not been an option taken up. So we have had to force the employer to take other direction in regard to our pension fund. They're still there. Two options now that they are putting forward is that we should be removed from the current status of our pension fund and put into a government type pension fund that is there. So in other words, in all due respect to government workers, a more inferior pension fund. So in essence, we are continuing on the fight of our pension. We have called a strike for the 3rd, which is coming up soon. And we have a rank and file members and activists have been requesting that we align ourselves with other workers that are taking industrial action, not just on the railway, but outside, CWU, etc., postal workers, and so on and so forth. So we are doing that. That is part of our strategy before the TUC motion, part of our effort to coordinate. And we do believe it's time for a general strike, because the reality is that we have a ruling party in government that is simply shifting the seat on the Titanic. That's all they're doing. And I don't think working people in this country should wait for 2 years before we are given the chance to change that over. Now, how we arrive there and what we do about the current option of a Labour Party that is uncommitted. I heard what the Stormer said at the TUC. I wasn't impressed. But it's not enough to not be impressed when we appear not to have a strategy on the left of how we will influence what the Labour Party does. And let's not forget, this is the same person who sacked a shadow minister for coming on our picket line, and he's now coming to the TUC. If I was there, I wouldn't let him in, but that's another story. The reality is that we have a struggle on our hand. It's not just about getting rid of the Tory. It's about getting a government that will work for us. Because changing the seat on the Titanic, as far as the Tory party is concerned, is the same game that they have around changing the political party. And we cannot accept that. We cannot put up with that. So, comrades, I hope that we can reach out and have a global solidarity, a global coordination, because many of working people around the globe are suffering in much the same way as we are here. We don't hear of food banks, but people are starving. People go to bed at night without a meal. Many have only eaten 1 meal a day. So we need to reach out beyond this scenario that's here. And I would like to send out solidarity greetings to everyone. If questions are to be asked, Martin, I'm here. Yep. Thank you.
Okay, no, thanks very much for opening up in the way that you have done. I think that's very interesting. In fact, one of the first questions in the questions and answers, which we will come back to after everyone's spoken, is what can class-conscious workers in the US learn about how to build inter-union solidarity? And you've started